Very good morning. You're with the news on headlines today. I'm Rishika Barua. We've been with tragic news of the Australian international cricketer Phil Hughes, who's passed away after he suffered a sickening blow during a Sheffield Shield match. Australian team doctor Peter Brunker confirmed about the sad news. Brunker mentioned Hughes never regained consciousness following his injury on Tuesday. Phil Hughes was struck by a rising ball, after which he was left stunned before falling to the ground. The southpaw was hit in the head from a shot ball by Sean Abbott. Hughes was given medical treatment on ground and was rushed away to St. Vincent Hospital. Hughes was under intensive care in induced coma. The news has passed shockwaves across the cricketing world. I'm joined live at this point in time by John Reid. John, thanks so much for speaking with us. Your first reactions to the tragic news coming in.
Well, it's one of great sadness, of course. This is almost unprecedented. People die in all sorts of ways, but it's rare for it to happen in elite sport. And Phillip Hughes was such a strong personality, a very popular cricketer in Australia, who had fought back several times from being dropped from the Test team without ever complaining. It's sometimes said that these things happen to the best people, and that's certainly the case now.
Well, absolutely. Also, there is, this entire incident, this entire episode, the way it was handled has sent shockwaves across the cricketing world, given the fact that he was wearing all the necessary gear while he was hit and still managed to sustain those injuries which he ultimately succumbed to.
Yes, he did. He was wearing a helmet, as just about every batsman does in first-class cricket. It's not compulsory, certainly not in this country, but you would be unwise not to wear one. But as with all forms of technology and equipment, nothing is perfect. The protective equipment available to cricketers is evolving, and the helmet he wore is a year or maybe 18 months out of date. So he was very unlucky. There was only a small part of his head that could have been hit, and unfortunately it was.
Right. Also, the Sydney Cricket Ground officials have confirmed that a call was made, in fact, 6 minutes after Hughes, in fact, fell to the ground at 2:23 p.m. But the ambulance did not arrive until 2:52 p.m. Are you at all alarmed by the way the Sydney Cricket Ground officials, in fact, handled this entire episode?
Look, that matter is under investigation by the authorities in Sydney, both the ambulance people and the government's health department. It does appear that the ambulances, and there was an ambulance station less than a kilometre from the ground.
Right.
And it did seem to take a long time to get there. But against that, the Cricket Australia's Chief Medical Officer, Dr. Orchard, he was on the scene. There were other people trained in resuscitation and the necessary procedures. And Phillip Hughes was attended to promptly and well, but we have to wait and see just what the official verdict is on the performance of the ambulance service.
Right, the cricket editor of the Herald Sun, John Reid, appreciate you joining us this morning. I'm also being joined live at this point in time by our consulting sports editor, Boria Majumdar. Boria, what do you make of what John Reid just said? He said that, the ambulance was parked a kilometre away and the incident was, in fact, handled to the best of their abilities. The Sydney Cricket Ground officials, are they at all culpable in this case of a delay?
I don't think so. Now a lot of questions will be raised about the 20 minutes, 25 minutes issue. And retrospectively, you can say a number of things. But firstly, we've got nobody can be blamed. I mean, except perhaps God. I mean, it's a cruel incident. I mean, I don't think anybody can be blamed for this. There was any laxity. I don't think Cricket Australia can be blamed, or the Sydney officials or the NSW officials.
Right.
I think this is one of the most tragic incidents I've ever heard on the sporting field. I said to you, Sini, a moment back, I spoke to a couple of Phil Hughes' teammates. They are in complete shock. I mean, they can't believe that this kind of a thing can happen. All said and done, a very, very talented youngster has been lost to the cricket world and more importantly to the human fraternity. That for me is the single biggest takeaway, that this sport is a hard sport. Players' lives are fragile, despite best of equipment, despite having everything, all of the protective gear. Even then, you can die. For me, that is a real scary takeaway.
Absolutely, Boria. While, we have talked about the tragedy, the details of what exactly transpired, tell us a little bit about Phil Hughes, the kind of career that he had in the past, what, lay ahead of him, what were the expectations from him. Tell us a little bit about his cricketing career.
He was definitely one of the most talented batsmen in Australia. He started his career with a real bang, got a couple of hundreds, then had a bit of a lean patch. When he came to India, his technique got a bit exposed, but then he countered that with some aggressive batting last year, had a good Ashes series, reasonable Ashes series in England when Australia didn't do too well. But then he was making a comeback. This was his comeback game, and he was batting against Sean Abbott, who's a mate. And all of Australia's leading cricketers, David Warner and company, were playing, who were still Hughes' mates.
Right.
And he was tipped to replace Michael Clarke, the Australian captain, in the first test in Brisbane, which I don't think can even be made now. So Phil Hughes, all said and done, was one of the most talented cricketers and was poised to make a test comeback for the Australian cricket team. So it's a very, very serious tragedy, come to think of it. To think that in 2014, a cricketer in Australia, where the best of medical facilities are there, can die on the cricket pitch is shocking.
Well, absolutely. It is shocking to say the least. Boria, I'd also like to draw your attention towards Shane Abbott. What kind of state of mind would that, would he perhaps be in? It's something that he's just going to have to live with for the rest of his life.
That's a very good question that you asked. I was actually thinking about him. Obviously he cannot be blamed at all. In fact, people should take care of him, maybe some kind of care, maybe I don't know what, but Cricket Australia will have to take care of Abbott. Obviously he will have to live with the stigma and scar that it was of his bowling that Phil Hughes got a mortal injury. But by no means, by no stretch of imagination can we blame him at all for this. But that's what it is. It's a very cruel sport. Abbott will now perhaps have to live with this for all his life. I don't know what happens to his cricket career. Can he bowl? Whenever he goes to bowl, will the thought continue to haunt him? This is not one single tragedy that afflicts Phil Hughes. It has afflicted the entire cricketing fraternity, and obviously Sean Abbott is at the center of it all. My heart and thought go out to him. I really hope his cricket career doesn't get jinxed as a result of this, but you've got to take care of him and keep telling him that by no means is he responsible for this tragedy.
Well, absolutely. Sean Abbott is going to have to go through, his own kind of turmoil because of this entire incident, and, he may perhaps need help, medical help, psychological support of some kind, and what this does to his cricketing career is, of course, also a big question. But just to like to draw your attention back to the tragedy, Hughes was due to celebrate his 26th birthday, Boria, this weekend. Has there been any word in from the family? I know that there's been a response that they want the media to stay away, they want their privacy at this point in time. But just tell us a little bit about, his family and his personal life.
No word from his family, and that is just. I think there should be no media scrutiny at this point in time. We should just let the family be. Right. I know a number of his mates were there in the hospital. I spoke to a couple of them, including David Warner, the Australian opening batsman, and Phil Hughes' best friend. I know Michael Clarke has been present 24/7 by the side of Phil Hughes. Michael was there till midnight and then went back at 6 a.m. once again. I know a couple of his friends flew in, Aaron Finch, and people flew in to New South Wales, to Sydney to be by his side. A number of Brett Lee and a number of the Australian cricketers from the past were there as well.
Right.
I've spoken to a couple of them, and I can tell you everybody is completely devastated, as is understandable. I asked one of them, can they be in any frame of mind to play? They are in complete shock. Whether or not the test series will start on the 4th, we don't know. Can the Australians take the field? We don't know, because this is something that has taken the cricket world completely by surprise and shock.
Absolutely. The shockwaves through the cricketing world at this time are absolutely imaginable. It's not just the fans and family members, but the entire cricketing fraternity that has come out and expressed solidarity with Phil Hughes' family. Boria, I'd just like to draw your attention to the details of what exactly happened. Apart from the fact that everybody is in shock and mourning this huge loss to Australian cricket and to world cricket, at that, the fact is that, he was wearing all the necessary protective gear, which to my surprise, John Reid just pointed out is not compulsory in Australia. He was wearing all the necessary protective gear that batsmen do wear, but despite that he sustained injuries which he finally succumbed to.
Yes, and I was reading an interview by the maker where he says that he was actually wearing an older version. But so you mean to say that the older version was not good enough to sustain an injury of this nature? You mean to say people can still succumb to a bouncer? He was wearing it, and Sydney Cricket Ground, I can tell you, is not the fastest cricket wicket in the world. I mean, having watched cricketing in Sydney for several years, it is not the fastest, and you know, that's why I keep saying that it was an act. It was the cruelest tragedy that can perhaps hit you. I mean, by no means can you explain this. It was a freakish accident, and we've always got to remember that it was an accident. Yes, in Australia,
right,
it is not compulsory. I don't think it's compulsory anywhere. I mean, in T20 cricket, how many times have you seen, take the Indian captain, I mean, the Indian players as well, they give away the helmets. So if something happens and some of them get hit by a bouncer and die,
right,
I don't think it's compulsory anywhere, but it tells you how hard the sport is, isn't it?
Absolutely. It is a freakish tragedy, Boria, like you point out, but it's an unprecedented loss for world cricket. Thanks, Boria, for joining us with those thoughts. We spoke with Saurav Ganguly a short while ago. Let's listen into his reaction.
Very disheartening, demoralizing to see, you know, somebody who has seen him play part of the Australian side and such a gifted player, and not just a player at the age of 25. When you lose a life, it's really, really depressing and disheartening. You know, I know people will say that hope his soul rests in peace, but it's a loss which is unbelievable, and it goes to show that in spite of all the equipment in sport, cricket is still such a dangerous game that ball can kill. And I remember saying that in a statement somewhere 2 or 3 weeks ago that however so the sport is, and however what we try and say, that red ball can kill. So you got to be careful, and to see someone who has seen so closely in the recent years make an impact to Australian cricket, not play the sport anymore. You know, it just goes to show that, you know, nothing is permanent in life, and anything can happen to you any day.
Absolutely, and sort of the fact that in spite of the fact that Hughes is wearing a helmet, this freakish accident took place. Rajiv in fact sharing details with us, saying that the ball hit him on a nerve between his ear and his helmet. In fact, in the pre-helmet era, batsmen were probably more wary of the ball, but we've been also reading blogs written by former cricketers where they say that people actually believe that the helmet is impregnable and they're safe to face any kind of ball.
I'm not sure whether the helmet is safe to play any kind of delivery, because it doesn't cover a lot of part of your head, right from the shoulder till the head. It doesn't cover a lot of it. So, and you could see Phil Hughes getting hit by a short ball on the left side of his head. He went through the pull shot, the ball came in late and it hit him in between the ears and the helmet. I've been hearing that the helmet manufacturer is saying that he was using an old helmet. So all cricketers will have to be very, very careful with that protective gear, especially at the top of the head. Because, you know, it's okay, you break an arm, you break a leg, but that doesn't kill you. But if it hits on the head, you know, it can take your life away, as it did in the case of Phil Hughes. So the helmet manufacturers will have to find out ways to protect, you know, probably right till the bottom of the lower part of the head, till where the time that the area between the top of the shoulder and the lower part of the head. Because as you saw with Phil Hughes, it's hit on the inside of the ear, the lower part of the ear, which actually is normally not covered by a helmet, and it's killed him. So the equipments will have to be a bit more stretched, a bit more covered, and to make sure that these things don't happen. Because at the end of the day, it's a sport. You know, you play a sport, and then the last thing you would want in a sport is to get killed.
Absolutely, Saurav. Thanks so much for speaking to Headlines today. Extremely unfortunate news we're tracking.
All right, that was Saurav Ganguly, in fact, who spoke to Headlines today. Earlier, joining me live at this point in time is Nikhil Chopra. Nikhil, taking off from what Saurav Ganguly, in fact, said about safety guidelines on cricket helmets, that's obviously under the microscope at this point in time. You know, the International Cricket Council has agreed to new helmet safety guidelines just a year ago. But Cricket Australia supports the new guidelines, but neither the ICC or any other country regulators have moved to actively enforce these new rules, meaning that players can continue to wear old helmets, which is what happened in this case.
Yeah, it's unfortunate, you know, now that the eyes have opened of the ICC and mostly all
respective boards, it's unfortunate that an incident like this would probably force open their eyes. Safety guidelines are a very important aspect of life, especially in sport. And we've all seen, things like this. Anything that happened with that red cricket ball. We saw the case of our ex-Indian cricketer Raman Lamba when he was hit on the head.
Right.
And now Phil Hughes. So, safety measures have got to be taken with utmost care. It is so very important.
Right, Nikhil, thanks so much for joining us with that perspective. Safety guidelines, of course, under the scanner at this point in time. And like Boria has been pointing out to us, this is a freakish tragedy that took place on the cricketing field, but an unprecedented loss in the world of cricket. We're going to continue to track developments on this story. We are, in fact, expecting that Cricket Australia will be holding a press conference shortly, and we will in fact be tracking that as well, getting you all the details on this story and a lot more on the other side. We're staying with the tragic news of Australian international cricketer Phil Hughes, who passed away after he suffered a